talk about perilous assignments for journalists these days, and the first countries that come to mind are places like Syria, Ukraine, or Somalia. But Iraq, which was a burial ground for media workers in the years immediately after the invasion in 2003, remains one of the most dangerous countries to report from. 5 reporters were killed there last year, second only to Syria, and once again, conditions are growing worse. Another reporter was killed last week on World Press Freedom Day when a car bomb that ISIL has claimed responsibility for took the life of Ammar Shahbandar. He was with the Institute for War and Peace Reporting. That was not a targeted killing, but last month, Ned Parker, the Baghdad bureau chief for Reuters, fled the country after his life was threatened, he said, for his reporting on a story involving ISIL. However, those threats did not come from the ISIL side of the story. They came from supporters of the government. The Reuters journalist was also identified by a reporter on a local TV channel. Reason enough in Iraq these days to pack your bags and head to the airport. But leaving Iraq is not an option for everybody, and countless local journalists are caught between various factions competing for power. With intimidation comes the chill. All those news stories that should get reported but don't. Our starting point this week is Baghdad.
Journalists continue to face dangers. There's a culture of impunity. We've seen deaths, we've seen attacks, we've seen kidnappings.
It depends on whether the journalist is viewed as being friendly or biased towards one group or another.
It's about controlling the messaging. So it's very difficult to try and find the truth of what's happening.
His life was one of 17 lost to a pair of car bombs that ripped through Karada in the heart of Baghdad. Ammar Shahbandar worked for an NGO that specializes in conflict zones, training journalists there.
The greatest impact he will leave is both on civil activism as well as the media work he was dedicated to. Unfortunately, he is just one of many colleagues who have been killed.
He was a mentor to a number of young journalists here in Iraq. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. It goes to show you that the security situation here in Iraq can affect anybody. But it's just the death of another person here in Iraq. And, 1,500 people died last month.
In that sense, it's symbolic that everybody faces these dangers in Iraq, not just its journalists.
According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, at least 15 media workers have been killed in Iraq since the start of 2013. Most were targeted. Ned Parker of Reuters says he did not want to be number 60. On April 3rd, Parker filed a story from Tikrit on government-backed forces recapturing the city from ISIL. Iraqis who took issue with his report went on Facebook, threatening his life. And what followed on an Iraqi TV channel called Al-Ad led Parker to conclude he was no longer safe. After a decade of covering Iraq, he left the country.
Here was the liberation of Tikrit, a major city, the most significant victory that the Iraqi forces have achieved against ISIS. And the reporting that came about it was focusing mainly on the transgressions that happened on the battlefield. But by and large, I think the reporting itself did not focus on any positive events that were happening with the liberation of the city, and rather focusing on the negative aspects.
In Tikrit, the big question was, what would those Shia-dominated groups do once they'd recaptured parts of Sunni heartlands? How would they act? And this was the time at which the Reuters report came in, that a Reuters journalist witnessed the impromptu execution of a suspected ISIS soldier in the streets, and that hundreds of houses had been burnt in Tikrit. And so this really touched a nerve.
It was just showing what had happened, and there were revenge attacks being taken place. Reuters decided to run that, and what happened was on a TV channel, Ned Parker, who was the Reuters bureau chief, was singled out. He was declared persona non grata for Iraq and for this TV channel in particular.
The gravest threat to journalists in Iraq remains the one posed by ISIL, not the indiscriminate attacks like the car bomb that killed Ammar Shahbandar, but targeted killings and kidnappings. According to figures compiled by the CPJ just last month, more than 20 Iraqi media workers remain missing or are known to have been abducted by the group. ISIL still holds significant territory in the country, and journalists know that to go there amounts to risking their lives for a story the militants clearly want told their way.
ISIS has targeted journalists who are Iraqis and non-Iraqis. There is a lot of killing also on the identity of the journalist. If he happens to be from a group ISIS considers to be a target, Shia or Kurd.
ISIL have a very smart media operation, and they use their own journalists, their own social media networks. They have a TV channel that they're trying to set up or have set up in Mosul. And for them, journalists are a nuisance because journalists want to look for the facts. And that's really what this is about.
Iraq's minister in charge of security summoned journalists to a meeting late last month, blaming the media for some of the government's setbacks in the fight against ISIL. Mohammed al-Gaban reportedly told gathered reporters most of the security collapses were due to psychological warfare, and that the media has a major role in creating this feeling among the people.
What the minister is speaking to is that since 2003, we've had a tremendous proliferation of non-state media. We've gone from 2 state channels to over 100 different channels across Iraqi TV. These, what are sometimes called ethno-sectarian media empires, these channels which reflect different interest groups within Iraqi society, also reflect power bases, and as power bases, they have guns and they have influence.
And because of this busy market, many inexperienced journalists have joined the industry and are broadcasting news that is sometimes unprofessional. So those claims do hold water, because there are news agencies that are disruptive and others that misinform or fabricate news. Many viewers have become disgruntled because they consider this media coverage as a conduit for the support of terrorism.
There are several outlets that, even though they are not praising ISIS, but by reporting on the perceived causes for ISIS success, criticizing the government, almost as giving a hint that there is a rationale for the existence of ISIS, or even the support for ISIS.
So, whilst there are dangers to journalists, you can't put this media back in the box. It's simply too diverse to just shut down.
When Iraq was invaded in 2003, a sectarian war was unleashed. The factions fighting on the ground have since taken their battle to the airwaves. The government, ISIL, and others all want to control the story, and some will kill journalists to get that control. For Iraqis, having all those new channels and freedom of the press doesn't amount to much when you don't know who or what to believe. On the download this week, our viewers on the state and the dangers of journalism in Iraq.